Are we? All right. Hey, everybody. This is Petrina with with a worship class at Opelika First Assembly, part of the Pioneer Network. And tonight is hopefully going to wrap up this class. And tonight I've borrowed from John Nicole his must-haves for a worship musician. And if you're not a musician, that's fine. You're still a worshiper. And this is a team devotional that was grown out of a series of blog posts of 200 words or less about being a worship musician. So it's kind of a survey. It's not a deep dive, but it was put together as a worship team devotional, and I thought it would really help for anybody who wants to be a better worshiper or just thinking about worship. And maybe if you are part of a worship team, then you can grab some of these ideas to take back with you. Let's see. This was meant to be a 10-week devotion series to be done with people where you have a few minutes of reading an article and a few minutes of talking about questions and a few minutes of prayer. But we're just going to zip through all of the points. So our 6 must-haves, our 6 things are on a slide where it says called, teachable, available, talented, surrendered, and passionate. And you can see they're built in kind of a pyramid shape with called at the top of the pyramid, which feels like that's the important part, but it's got to have the foundation parts of talented, surrendered, and passionate to build on. And most of these points should be evident in a person's life if they plan to be a worship leader or a worship musician. So John makes the introduction. He says, what makes for a good worship team musician? You got to have talent, right? But is talent enough? Or is it good enough to be faithful to the ministry? Or where does passion fit in and spiritual maturity? What about being called to the ministry, which is kind of an intangible thing? And as he says, you think about building a house. You think about stuff that holds your house together from the foundation up to the roof. It's all important, but each part plays a different role. So these 6 elements build a great worshiper. And specifically, like I said, this was keyed toward people who were on the platform leading worship, but being surrendered and passionate and teachable and available still applies to everybody. Let's start with some discussion just about these characteristics. We're going to read Psalms 127, verse 1. If I can find Psalms 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman keeps awake in vain. So some of the questions I have are, how would you rank these characteristics and why would you rank them that way? So just something to think about. If you were talking about these 6 things, would you put called at the top or would you put called in the middle? Would you put, what did I say was a foundation? Talented and surrendered as part of your foundation. Would you even include passionate? We'll talk about in a few minutes. Sometimes passionate tends to be kind of a scary topic because some people who have passion, we're adjusting. Some people who have a lot of passion kind of go off the rails and go into places where maybe you wish they wouldn't. So it's kind of scary to have somebody with a lot of passion on your team. or in your group. But this verse in Psalms, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. So that's linking with this idea that we're building a foundation and we're building this, like in this case, it was building a worship team. But in your case, maybe it's building your worshiper's heart, starting with a good foundation of having that right relationship and then building up. Another question is, which of these have you given the least thought to? Maybe you don't think about being teachable as something that you need to worship. Maybe you don't think about having, a lot of people think about talent, but maybe you don't think about being available or being surrendered. We're going to talk about those things. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is talent. You might think that this would go without saying, but we've all been to or visited that church or that meeting that has less than talented musicians helping lead music. And here's a few things. Talent is relative to the size of the group. A church of 5,000 will probably have a different level of talent than a church of 50. Every ministry has to decide what they need and what their level is. As teams grow and change, so does the demand for these better talented people. But talent can be developed. It's cultivated through practice and hard work and experience. And if someone is using their talent for ministry, then someone who's in leadership is pretty much obligated to help them develop that. Talent is not a spiritual gift. Being able to sing is maybe a gift from God, but it's not one of the spiritual gifts. It's a tool. Being able to play an instrument, being able to sing, having any kind of talent is a tool that's used in conjunction with spiritual gifts, but it's not necessarily a spiritual gift. And you don't, I don't appreciate, and my friend John here also doesn't appreciate when someone comes up and says, singing is my spiritual gift, and so I need to be on this team and sing a solo. That's not how it works. Having talent is really great, and I love meeting people who have talent, but it's not enough. Talent is not enough to be a worshiper. John Maxwell wrote an entire book on this. We start with talent because it is necessary for people who are leading, but it can't be the only element to your worship. And if you feel like you're watching this and you're like, well, I don't have any talent at all, that's fine if you're not leading. If you're worshiping, you don't need to have that talent right away. You can make that joyful noise. And bless you. Let's read Psalm 33. Psalm 33, verses 1 through 3 says, sing for joy in the Lord, O you righteous ones. Praise is becoming to the upright. Give thanks to the Lord with a lyre. Sing praises to him with a harp of 10 strings. Sing to him a new song. And this is the key line that I love. Play skillfully with a shout of joy. Does play skillfully really matter to God? I mean, if he says make a joyful shout, does play skillfully really matter? Something to think about. I think he wants you to do your best and grow and get better. I think he wants you to sing your best. But I also think that if you can listen and maybe hear yourself and go, oh, I'm not sounding exactly like those other people, maybe I should blend in, try to do like this. I'm not saying be quiet. I'm saying, listen. Why is it so easy to get possessive about our musical talent and our place on a team? Like I said, this is a team devotional thing. Sometimes there can be a sense of entitlement, especially if somebody's been on a team for a couple of years, like they deserve to be there every week. And we need to, remind ourselves that God deserves to be worshiped and praised. We don't deserve to have this position. We're allowed to have this position. Everyone in church who is using their corporate worship time to praise and worship God is called by God to give him that praise and glory. God deserves praise, but being in a sense of in a place of leadership is not an entitlement. The question was, why is it so easy to get possessive? That's something I'm just going to let you guys think about. I have to think about that for myself. Why would I get possessive about being on a team or about what talents I have and things like that? All right, so our next point is surrendered. And that's going to take two the idea of surrendered, because the first part is going to be surrendered to God. No doubt you've heard about the challenge given to D.L. Moody. It remains to be seen what God will do with a man who gives himself up wholly unto him, or some variation of that line. And Moody's answer back was basically, I'll be that man. And he was. He was going to give himself wholly to God. We usually hear this exchange in a sermon about surrendering to God. And the problem is the preacher doesn't always tell us that this falls in the category of way easier said than done. As John writes, a mentor once said to me, one of the beautiful things about following Christ is that it's daily. And one of the most frustrating things about following Christ is that it's daily. Lamentations says the new mercies of God are new every morning. God's mercies can't be experienced fully without that new day's surrender. Sure, there's a few things that I've surrendered once for all, but a lot of things, pride, agenda, sin, those things we have to surrender up every day. And it's not just worship musicians or leaders, but consider it the responsibility of not just the worship leaders, but every worshiper to surrender your pride, to surrender your agenda. Like, what do I get out of this? If I pray, will God answer me the way I want it? If I worship him and give him praise, will he bless me back? That's just got to be surrendered every day. That's kind of a feeling of entitlement that I'm a good person and I live a good life and I come to church every week. And, now I'm having a hard time, God. What's up with that? And I mean, like, God has been dealing with Karens forever. So it's not a new thing. Let's go ahead and read Lamentations 3:22 and have some discussion questions there. Lamentations is in the Old Testament. The Lord's loving kindnesses indeed never cease, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I have hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the person who seeks him. It is good that he waits silently for the salvation of the Lord. So, God's mercies are new no matter what, every day. But what are some of the conditions that we need to think about for experiencing those new mercies of God? Well, what if I have my hands like this and somebody's trying to give me a present? I had a friend today, a dear sweetheart friend, and I don't lock the doors of my car when I'm at my office. It's just open. So when I went to go and get in my car this afternoon, there was a little gift bag in my car. If my car had been locked, she would not have left the gift bag there. But because my car was open, she left me a gift bag, which was so wonderfully kind. It had purple in it. But likewise, if you have open hands, you can receive what God's going to be giving you. If you're holding on to something really tightly, then your hands aren't open to receive things. If you're holding on to your agenda, or if you're holding on to some anger or pride or unforgiveness, then you're holding on to some things that might be holding you back from those new mercies that you could receive. God's got those new mercies new every morning, but there are some things that can get in the way of that. How does waiting, hoping, and seeking relate to surrender? That's from the verse in Lamentations. Sometimes we surrender, and we have to surrender more than once, more than one day at a time. We have to do it the next day and the next day and the next day, and keep seeking and keep hoping for an answer to what we're asking God for. The mercy of your breath is there. The mercy for most of us. The mercy for me, I can get out of bed on my own 2 feet, and I'm really thankful for that. For me, I live in a place where I can turn on my tap and drink clean water, and I'm really thankful for that. There's a lot of mercies that I need to be thankful for, but there's also some things that I had, like, I can't speak to right now in the future, but I can tell you in the past, there were some things that I was hoping for, some things that I was seeking, some things I asked God for, and it didn't happen right away. It didn't happen when the mercies were new in the morning. I was surrendered and waiting and saying, not my will, but yours, God, in your time. All right, so submission has a second part. And the second part is submission and subordination. Yep, submission and subordination. Submission is one of those words that make people kind of bristly, cringe, wince. They react adversely. I'm not going to make a case for submission to authority because Scripture does that. But a key element for us is submission to Christ, submission to God. We also have to look at submitting to those in spiritual authority over us. So one of the lessons that we have to learn is that God's delegated authority comes from their position, not from their ability. I have been put under worship leaders who were amazing and great, and I loved everything about what they did. And then you can be under a pastor or a worship leader who doesn't do things the way you want them to. You can sit under a pastor that maybe you get to a point where you feel like I could do it better. And sometimes the point is not that guy's or that girl's ability to lead or do whatever. It's about your ability to submit. Was it Ricardo who said, it's not submission until you are trying to do something you don't really like? Something like that. What does it look like for a volunteer worship musician to submit? It doesn't mean that they don't suggest things or talk about changes or even challenge some decisions, but the attitude and the manner and the way that things are delivered. And what about if you're in a ministry that's not a worship leading, put it in another context. If you're in a ministry and you've got an authority over you and then another authority over that person, and that person who's in authority over you, that they're designated the leader, you feel like they're not doing it the right way. They're not doing it the way you would, or they're not doing it as well as you could. Sometimes you're there not for their leadership, but you're there to learn your submission. Just a thought. There are a couple of ways of figuring out, am I following? Am I really being submissive? Think about your attitude when you want to talk about something. You know, there's a line you just don't need to cross when you address other people that are in authority over you. One way to detect a little bit of rebellion is, how do you talk about that person to other people? Is it like, man, they did the dumbest thing? Or do you like respect that person even when they're not around? Do you respect them to other people? If you find that you can't, in good conscience, submit to the person who's in authority over you, then if you're able to, you should quit or leave. But if God's not leading you to quit or leave, then you'd be taking yourself out from underneath his authority and his protection. So your other option is to learn that submission and go ahead and experience the freedom that comes with that. Let's look at Romans 13, verse 1. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans 13, 1. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities. There is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. I think at this point, not just some spiritual authority like your pastor or your worship leader, whatever, your ministry leader, but he's also talking about worldly government, the authority of our world. When God, it's not like a big surprise when somebody gets put into power. He knows about it. Let's look at Hebrews 13. Verse 17. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls. Now, this is Hebrews. He's talking about God-pleasing sacrifices and, part of being in the fellowship of believers. And in that context of God-pleasing sacrifices and the high priest and things like that, he says, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they watch over your souls as those who would give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with grief. That would be unprofitable for you. So why do we tend not to submit to someone who may not lead like we want them to? That's a thing to think about. Why do we do that? Sin, pride, rebelliousness, a little selfishness. I don't do it the way I want them to. That's not how I would have done it. That's not how we used to do it. That's never done it that way before. Those are all excuses. What are some signs that we are not submitting to those in authority? Big one is how you talk about that person when they're not around. Do you talk about them respectfully and in a good light, or do you talk about them in a derogatory manner? That would show whether or not you are in your heart submitting to that person. Those are some things to think about. Our next point is passion. Passion, John writes, passion seems a little fluffy to be part of the foundation of our 6 elements. It's important, but passion can often be misguided. And he references the first few episodes of any season of American Idol are great examples of a deep desire, but deeply diluted. Holy cow, someone should have told those kids this is John's words. Someone should have told those kids they really can't sing before they camped out for 3 days in Cleveland. So hopefully, to a lesser extent, maybe you've encountered some misguided passion on a church or in a worship team. Sometimes people really, really want to, and they're just so fired up and so excited, but maybe they're missing some of that talent, or maybe they're a little disrespectful when it comes to talking to the leader, or even about the pastor or about the ministry leader. So passion can scare us because passion can kind of get out of hand sometimes. Passion has to be subjected to a surrendered heart, both surrendered to Jesus and to those he's delegated the leadership to. And it has to be tied up. If you're a worship leader, it needs to be tied with real gifting and talent. fervor for singing or playing music should be subordinate underneath the passion for serving God. David, no doubt, had a passion for music, but it was a tool that he used. I think I put that down. Yes, passion for music or singing is underneath the tool. It's used as a tool to express your love for God, because we're not about singing, we're about worshiping God. If I have an acquaintance, person that I used to know way back, in like second or third grade. We went to Brownies together, and I followed her on Facebook when Facebook became a thing. And she had this ministry. She was working with this woman who had this worldwide ministry, and she played guitar and sang and led worship. And I was like, wow, she has got it all together. She is going places. And then found out she's moved back to town, to our hometown. And I was like, well, how about that? I wonder what happened. And then she had, oh gosh, I can't remember the disease. Anyway, it's one of those diseases that comes up, and then it starts to get worse and worse, and then she lost ability to walk, and she lost ability to play the guitar. She lost ability to go on the road and travel with these people. So she's stuck in a wheelchair, and she's got, she doesn't have that ministry anymore. But I know that she still praises God and she still worships without having the ability to sing really loud like she used to, because she just doesn't have the breath, without the ability to use her hands like she used to, without the ability to stand up and lead. She still worships. So it's not about it's not about how much talent and what you can do and give to God that way, although he does love that, and it is very useful for leading other people. But what he really, that ability and that talent has to be in support of giving God praise and glory. Imagine an alternative if we didn't have passionate people on our teams. We would have volunteers who happen to play an instrument, and they're available and they're willing to sacrifice a Sunday or two to come up and join us. Can you imagine how unfulfilling that worship must be to God if the person who's playing for him isn't passionate about serving him? Yeah. Let's read Psalm 57. Psalm 57, verses 7 through 11. My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises. Awake, my glory. Awake, harp and lyre. I will awaken the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the people. I will sing praises to you among the nations. For your loving kindness is great to the heavens, and your truth up to the clouds. Oh, be exalted above the heavens, O Lord our God. Let your glory be above all the earth. What do you see in this about the relationship between David's music and his relationship to God? He says, awake my harp and lyre. I will awaken the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord. So he's using his harp and his lyre to give praise to God and to sing praises to God through the nations. But if he didn't have his harp or his lyre, he would still sing. And if his tongue was cut out, he would still dance. And if his feet were broken, he would still, in his heart, worship and give praise to God. So we have that passion for God, not necessarily for being able to play and sing, but being able to play and sing is nice. But without a passion, it's just what all the other, celebrities, musicians do. We need to have that passion, even though it can be a little intimidating, a little bit scary to have somebody with so much passion that you're like, whoa, you are really not quite ready for this. I love the enthusiasm. Another question. Why is the passion for music so dangerous? Like I talked about earlier with this poetry, music can really move your heart. And music can really make you have all the feels. And sometimes when you're really passionate about music, that feeling and that emotion kind of makes you think, maybe I just worshiped God. But if you haven't set aside your pride, if you haven't submitted yourself to God, then maybe you just had some really good emotional time with some music. So passion for music can be kind of dangerous, is what he says. I was thinking about other ministries. Why can a passion for a ministry be kind of dangerous? If you've got somebody who's really passionate about this, they start to do this service ministry and neglect their family, or they do this service ministry to the point where they neglect their work. They do this service ministry where it takes them, their regular Sunday morning getting together with other, fellowshipping with other Christians. That ministry could become an idol to them. That work that they're doing could become an idol, and not the giving their worship to God, who deserves, that time. So just a thought that misplaced passion can get a little dangerous, but if we keep yourself in the Word, and especially in the Psalms, man, keeping yourself in the Psalms really helps. I think I have 10 more minutes. Is that right? And we've got 15, 16, 17, available, called. All right, well, I'm just going to keep going and see how far I can get. Our next point is being teachable, and it's in two parts. The first part is taking direct feedback. So I'm going to tell a little story about John, because I didn't have time to think of a story on my own. Maybe one will come to me. So John Nicole, who wrote this devotional, a few years ago, I joined a songwriting organization, and I attended the local chapter. And at the first meeting, I felt really bad for those other writers getting picked apart during the critique sessions. And I thought, they'll probably feel even worse when they hear my song. Red flags right there, right? So then it was my turn, he says. The scratch demo ends. The silence is somewhere between hushed awe and quiet reverence. Yeah, no, it was starving jackals waiting to ravage a gimp antelope, entrails everywhere. So he had his song, and they were going to pick his song apart too. And he was at a crossroads. Do we chalk this up to a bunch of bitter songwriters, or do we think, oh, maybe they do know something about songwriting? He chose the latter. He psyched himself up with, be humble and learn. Be humble and learn. Do I have? Yes, it's hard. Being teachable is hard, especially after you get past a certain experience level or a certain age. You feel like, I've read the Bible 17 times all the way through. I know a thing or two about the Bible. What can this guy teach me? If you're not humble and teachable, who knows what that guy can teach you? You won't know, because you got your mind closed off. Being a good leader in any ministry requires you to continue to be teachable. Direct feedback is like oxygen when you need to grow. Any ministry, whether it's an upfront ministry, whether it's leading little kids downstairs and learning Psalm 23, everybody needs to be open and breathing in some moments when they can be taught a new thing. So let's look at Proverbs 27, verse 5 and 6. Proverbs 27. Better is open rebuke than love that is concealed. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. It's kind of like in Shrek when Donkey says, "Ooh, only a true friend would be so brutally honest." And that's true. Only your real friends are going to say, "You got something in your teeth right there," kind of thing. It's hard to take criticism. It's also hard to give that to somebody who may be in a spiritual authority over you, or maybe even somebody who's under you. Sometimes it feels like if you were to really tell them what you thought, maybe that would hurt their feelings and they would go away and never come back, and you would lose a good volunteer. But maybe that's why God put you in their life, is so that you could give them some of this feedback. Why is it so hard to take constructive criticism? A lot of it's just it's just simple. It's just pride. It's just pride that I've taught myself this, or I've sat under such and such a teacher and I've learned this, and I can't think of much else why we would find it hard to take. It's mostly pride. How do we hurt our team, our ministry team, if we withhold feedback? Well, they could be getting better. They could be learning some things, and if you're not free to give them feedback, then they're not going to learn that stuff. And that can be even if you're the only team that you're on is the congregation. If you're in a congregation and you're not on any other service ministry, you can still be taught. You can still open yourself up to being taught by something that somebody else has said or shared. Okay, teachable part 2 is that indirect feedback. Indirect feedback is seeing people's body language. And now I have to take this with a grain of salt, because I look out sometimes on Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings, and I see people not engaged with what I'm doing. And it makes me be like, did I miss God? I really thought that I was doing the right song. I really thought that I was singing well. I really thought that I was worshiping, and I was just opening the floodgates to God is going to come down and be here. And sometimes it's just a brick wall. It's just, I'm not getting anything back. I'm not getting that, the indirect feedback, the things that people are not saying are, I wish I was anywhere else but here. So that makes me question, well, maybe I didn't do things right. Maybe they're not connecting. Maybe I need to go back to a hymn, or maybe I need to make sure that the words are up on the screen that they can follow. Maybe I need to follow up on that. So looking at what people are not saying and how they're doing feedback is important. If you're in a small group, if you're leading a small group ministry and you've read a couple of things and you asked a question and nobody raised their hand or starts to answer the question, maybe they didn't follow you. Maybe what you were saying wasn't clear. Maybe you need to go back and say it again. Maybe it was perfectly clear and everybody's dealing with it a different way. So that's just something where you're going to have to really trust Holy Spirit. If Holy Spirit is like, no, child, you did the right thing, you said the right thing, you sang the right song, it's all on their hearts if they're not following or listening or coming along wherever you're leading, then, that's what we have to rest in also. But if I have been teaching or if I have been singing and I look out and they're not following where I'm leading, then maybe I need to stop and say, okay, let's look at this a different way. When I taught math, I got those blank stares from a lot of kids. And I'd be like, okay, I'm sensing in the room that there's not 100% comprehension. And don't get mad at them because they're just kids. Don't get mad at people in your Bible study because they haven't put the hours of study into it that you hopefully have. Take it as something, let's just do that again and see if I can say it in a different way. And see if I can say that or show that in a different way. Let's see. Let's look at Ephesians 4. All this time, my phone has been like, I can't do that thing that you just asked me to. So, poor phone. What did I say? Ephesians? Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Ephesians 4. With all humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance for one another in love, being diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Let's go. Let's read the whole sentence. So Paul writes Ephesians, therefore I, prisoner of the Lord, implore you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you've been called, with humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance for one another in love. So how does this verse apply to us looking for indirect feedback? It's being patient and showing tolerance and preserve unity. We're not there to show off when we're put in the position of leadership. We're not there to, we're not even there if we're supposed to be teaching a class. We're not even there to get through the class. We're there to preserve unity and bring other people where we've been. What about nonverbal cues that others might give us? I think we talked about that a little bit. So you can put yourself in whatever ministry or service or activity that you do where you might have some nonverbal cues, and think about, am I listening to those? Am I adjusting my course? Am I listening to God and making sure that it's not on them, it is on me? So all those kind of things. I'm going to quit here. There were two other points. One was being available. Which is just what it sounds. If someone is too busy for worship, if they're too busy to serve God in some way, to follow where He leads or obey God's calling, if they're not available, then what can they do for God if they're not available? And then there's being available in your heart too. That comes up under submissive and surrender to God. And then there's being called to the ministry. I'm going to just go hit that real quick. Let's skip to called. It's not because you want to serve in a ministry. It's not because you have a talent, like you're able to speak really well, or you're able to teach really well, or you're able to, you could sell a, broken-legged donkey to people wandering in the wilderness. I mean, it's about being called. And I just love some of these things. It's not a matter of desire. It's not about talent. When you are called to something, it's not usually permanent. Sometimes the one place that you're called to for a season is preparing you for your next calling. Some things that it is, you go to the next one. It is affirmed by your peers, confirmed by your leadership. A real calling is an invitation to serve in the church. A real calling is an expectation to produce good fruit. And real calling can be postponed, he says shelved, but not ignored forever. If God does put a calling on your life, you might be like, now it's not a really good time. He's like, okay, but I'm not taking this calling away from you. You need to answer this calling. And it requires humility. So accepting God's call to whatever ministry or service requires you to stay humble before Him. Let's close on these verses in Matthew. Matthew 4, starting in 18. Now, as Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew, his brother. And they were casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me. Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. Going from there, he saw two others, the brothers James and John, son of Zebedee, and they were with their dad. And he called them, "Follow me." And they left their boat and they left their father and they immediately followed him. That's what a calling looks like. I know that sounds simple, and maybe you won't hear the actual Jesus voice reaching his hand out and saying, "Follow me." But when you spend time with Jesus, you'll know his voice. You'll know that calling. And like I said before, it'll be confirmed by people in leadership above you. It'll be confirmed by other Christians who love you and care about you. It'll be reaffirmed. Ask me sometime why I'm here at Pioneer Network. All right. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you another time.